Hey, welcome back to Fix It for Josh's Sake. Today we're going to work on a 1972 Arctic Cat Lynx. This is universal for all early Arctic Cats. In the 70s, a lot of them had steel gas tanks. Kind of cool ones, like this one right here. It's got the lightning bolts on the tank. I'm pretty sure these lightning bolts take your brap brap, turns into like zap zap, and you go really fast. Well, we got some challenges here on this tank that I'm going to take you along with as we fix it for Josh's sake. Who doesn't love Christmas cookies? Like, let's look down inside of here. I'm pretty sure we got some gingerbread cookies sitting in here. Oh, wait a minute. That is some crusty, rusty problems. Well, if you got the gingerbread man in your gas tank, in order to kill him, we got to go ahead and get ourselves some chain, maybe some nuts and bolts like this, and we're going to put them down inside of here and shake this thing all around and clean that stuff up. We want to get back down to the metal. And then, once we get down to the metal, we're going to have to do something to keep it metal for a long time. So I'm going to put some tank sealer on this, and then hopefully we have ourselves a good gas tank that lasts a really long time. Allows us to ride for the next, 45 years or something. I know you're probably thinking, well, why don't you just clean up the inside of the tank, put gas in it, and call it good? Well, I have a bit of a challenge here that I'm going to kind of show you up and close. I cleaned this tank out with kerosene and splashed it all around, rinsed it out really good. I ran water in, or hot water, soapy water in this port and in this port, back and forth, cleaned it all up. And then I let it sit, and I started to notice we've got these shimmer spots. And this tank is primed, nice and clean, but all these shimmer spots, well, what do you think those are? Those, my friend, unfortunately, are pinholes, and I've got a bunch of them around this tank. So I am hoping the claim on this tank sealer is actually accurate in saying that I can seal all those little pinholes with some of this tank sealer. Well, now that you know the plan for this lightning bolt gas tank I got brewing here, let's get to work and fix this thing for Josh's sake. You know that random tub or bucket of all the stuff and things you've been saving for the last 10 years? Go ahead and dump it out onto a rag and sort through that puppy and see if we can't find ourselves a big old pile of quarter 20s. This is a perfect use for all of those random odds and ends of fasteners we've been holding on to. Then when you got enough to call it good, take that rag, flip it over like this, grab the whole thing, plop it back on the tub, and sure beats picking those things up one by one, doesn't it? Well, that was a lot of turning in circles, but I had enough random nuts and bolts of quarter 20 laying around in my junk pile to put one on about, every 12 inches or so on this 50-foot chain. And so we're going to feed this chain down into this gas tank and shake it all about. And that, my friend, is 50 feet of chain inside of an Arctic Cat lightning bolt gas tank. Pro tip for you here, don't let the end of your chain fall down into that tank, because otherwise you're going to have a heck of a time finding the beginning of it. It's just easier to keep that one out. I'm going to be using some painter's tape here, wrapping it around this, holding it all good, and then I can start shaking this tank all around. Well, that's kind of fun. I'm shaking around on this, and right away I noticed that I was getting a lot of dirt out of this port. So I got one of these 1-inch plugs that I'm going to screw in there and tighten down and keep the junk from getting all over my bench here while I shake this around a bunch. But I think we're really getting stuff cleaned out inside of there. That's a lot like work. Well, that's interesting. Got my chain balled up and stuck in there. Huh. Uh-oh. Well, I'm going to cut the video and see if I can figure out how to get that out of there. So slowly but surely this is coming out. The thing that I liked about this chain was that it was small enough for a 1/4 bolt to go right into and tighten in on. And I also liked this aggressive wrap because I thought it would be nice for busting apart any rust and grime. The catch-22 is the thing that makes it attractive in that it is aggressive. It is actually causing it to bind up on itself and making it rather difficult to get out of here. So my suggestion is, if you are cleaning out a tank and you're using nuts and bolts and chains to break it apart, get the round length chains that interlock like this without this double figure 8 pattern. I think you'll probably be able to pull that chain right out of here with not much problem. How a plan looks in your head and how a plan actually results, it's two different things. So I'm going to go at it with my side cutters here. I'm going to cut all these off because none of these are coming out. I'm thinking I got a big ball inside of there. I'll roll it around, find some ends, start pulling them out of there piece by piece. Obviously, it's a little more complicated than we want, but I'm pretty sure this side cutters is going to rescue me a little bit out of my predicament here. All right, we'll keep pulling around and do something like that. It's moments like this you got to stop and ask yourself, what did I learn from this? And I will say this, these big long bolts, any of the longer bolts, they're the ones that cause the problem. The short little like 1/2-inch bolts, maybe even the inch-long bolts, they didn't really get jammed up too much. But these big long ones, they were getting a bunch of extra chain links wrapped around them and stuck in them, and it made it a lot more difficult to get it out of this hole. So if I would suggest anything, I would say go into your junk bin, grab your little bolts, and use a regular oval-shaped chain link, not the figure 8 style. And I think you'll be able to drop your chain in, crush it all around in there, rattle can the thing, and then pull them back out, and voila, have yourself a bunch of stuff to wash out of the tank. How's that for a tip? What a mess. This is all full of rust and soot and grime now. I'm going to rinse this out with hot water and soap, and then I'm going to do a second rinse with isopropyl alcohol, blowing it out really good with my air compressor in between each one of those. I want to get this dried up real fast so we don't have any flash rusting. So there's a lot of rust that came out of here when I ran that hot soapy water and rinsed it out the best I could. Here's the tank, and then I went ahead and took one of these heat guns that are made for pulling vinyl stickers and things like that off of stuff. Ran that in here for a while, and then I blew it out with my air compressor, and then ran this in there for a while again. I think we're in a real good spot here where I'm going to put some isopropyl alcohol, say that 5 times fast. I'm going to put some isopropyl alcohol in here, shake it all around, dump it back out into the sink here, and blow it out again with my air compressor and get everything out of here. Blowing both in from the fuel input port here, output and input port there, as well as in the gas cap to hopefully purge it really well before we put that tank liner in. I'm about ready to put this tank sealer into this tank here, but let me show you some of the things I got staged here. Got myself my 1-inch rubber plug to put in this hole before I dump the tank sealer in. I've got myself some chopsticks so I can stir up my tank sealer good. Do not shake this or whip it or anything fast. You want to stir it nice and slow and pull the thick stuff from the bottom up to the top. We don't want any air bubbles in there or anything like that. We just need a nice slow stirring process on this. The other thing is you're going to have this tank sealer all over the inside of your gas cap. So for me, I'm trying to save my rubber gasket that's in here. And so I went down to the hardware store and I bought one of these. This is a 2 3/8 OD by an 1.5 ID large rubber washer. This was in the plumbing department. Looks like that, and it'll fit right down in there. And then I plan on pulling this out and throwing it away when I'm done, because it's going to be full of silver tank liner, which obviously is going to be crispy and stiff and not able to seal anymore. So this is a one-time use washer that we're going to throw away when we're done. And then lastly, anywhere you have big pinholes, this stuff claims that it's supposed to actually fill pinholes. But if you have some bigger holes, like I had a bigger hole here down on the bottom underneath here, I have a couple bigger holes. They say, as in, this is a KBS brand. I don't care what brand. All tank sealers seem to kind of work pretty good. There's Pro 15. There's a couple other brands. But they sell a mesh tape, they call it. And I would imagine it's something that's kind of like fiberglass tape or something to that effect with an adhesive on the back of it. Well, I don't have the patience to go online and order their tape and I'll get all that stuff. So I've got a roll of gaff tape here. Musicians love this stuff. This will stick to anything and actually be a real pain in the ass to get off after a show. But it's a real tacky mesh, kind of like cloth fiber with adhesive on the back of it. And so I'm going to be using that to cover anything that's bigger than a pinhole. And this one was pretty bad right here. I have a couple on the bottom with this same gaff tape. So I'm going to keep this off to the side here so that when I dump this sealer in, if any of it starts to weep out of a hole somewhere and actually drips out, I'm going to cut myself a chunk of this, put it on there, real tough or real good. Make sure it sticks real good. And then after I'm done swooshing it all around in there and flipping this tank all over the place, you drain the remainder out back into the can. Now it says the way KBS says to do it is then you take a brush and you come back out with a little paintbrush and you brush out any of these external spots that are pinholes, and you actually coat a layer of this tank sealer on the outside on this mesh tape. So that's what they say to do. That's my strategy. I might not have their mesh tape, but I've got some mesh tape, and I'm going to go at it like that and see how it works. Wish me luck. Let's dig into this. Oh yeah, and probably one of the most important things, little warnings down here. Make sure you're using some gloves. It's not a good idea to get this on your skin. Secondly, make sure you're in good ventilated area. Thirdly, don't light up a cigarette when you're working with this stuff. You don't want to have a cigarette and these fumes mix because this is flammable. So yeah, let's get into this. Have some fun making this tank look a little better inside. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, getting this lid off is a lot easier said than done. This didn't have enough grip and leverage to pull it off. This did not have enough grip and leverage to pull it off. This didn't. And when I say didn't, what it does is it unrolls the lid coil that's at the top here. Because again, we're dealing with tank sealer. I wiped this off now, but that rim gets sealed so tight that it's almost impossible to get off. In fact, one time, a couple years ago, I got a can of this stuff and I worked at it, could not get it up. It was actually tearing the entire lip off. I took it back to Napa, their paint department. The guy went at it with a vice grip and it literally couldn't get the can open. The only way we could get it open is by like stabbing it and peeling a big hole in the top of it. We decided it was no good. He gave me a new can and I came home and got busy. But just take your time. I ended up using my 6-in-1 painter tool here and carefully prying. I'm talking a labor of love here to get this open so we can now start to mix up our tank sealer. Before I actually grab my chopsticks and start stirring this up, I'm going to take this lid, set it aside, and I'm going to take some painter's tape and line this rim a little bit what I want to do is make sure I don't have a bunch of tank sealer down in this groove, because eventually I am going to want to put this lid back on. Like I said before, we're going to fill this tank, we're going to roll it all around, slosh it all around, but then we're going to dump some back in here. So we want to keep this rim from getting all gunked up. So I'm going to run some tape around here like that and help keep this edge from getting all filled up. Something didn't quite seem right when I did that last step. The final step to get this correct is you take this little tab of tape here and you fold it under. And the reason we're doing that is we want to give our paint a place to drip off of. So now when I'm dumping this out of this V, it follows the spout trough kind of area here and goes right into my can. And I don't have a big mess all over inside of the rim of my can. All right, might as well do it. Let's dump this in and start tipping the tank around and coating that inside. Take advantage of all that prep work that I just did and cleaning the tank, and go ahead and seal it up really good now. All right, that ought to be good. Look at that. Not too shabby. I'm going to put my lid on and start moving it all around. This is going to take a while, I think. As I'm doing this, I'm watching for the tank sealer to be seeping out any of the pinholes in the tank. I want to spot those and put the mesh tape on them right away if I see any. I don't think this stuff moves real fast. It's pretty thick. It's kind of like maple syrup, so you're not sloshing it around like a water bath. You're turning it pretty slow. My main concerns are all of the welded seams along here. I want to be sure that these all are sealed well. Well, there we go. There's our first culprit right there. I am going to go ahead and wipe this off, and then I will put a piece of mesh tape on that and seal that up right away. The human eye loves to catch straight lines, so I like to kind of cut these into a stop sign shape. Maybe that'll help them not be so obnoxiously obvious when light and shadows and things like that catch those little patches that we have to put on. If you see any other holes popping through and letting sealer out, let me know, okay? So far, so good from what I'm seeing. Well, I'm going to be here a while tipping this around. They say every 3 to 5 minutes you tip it again. For these first 5 minutes or so, I'm just going to keep rotating it around and around, make sure every area is coated. So I'm going to keep at it here. So I've been sloshing this around and rotating it quite a few times in every direction, really focusing on making sure that the bottom seam is good, making sure that the bottom is where there was a lot of pinholes. So that's obviously very coated. I also was watching this upper edge where I had a couple of pinholes. I've rotated it all around very, very well. Took my cap off and looked down in there, and everything looks very well coated. So now I'm going to remove this plug. I'm going to keep a towel on hand, and I'm going to remove this plug and then try to clean the threads out the best I can. And then I'll be setting it on this can as well as on, I have an old can here, and I'll basically flip this tank up, set it on these two cans. This one will have the lid off, and if there is any excess tank sealer, it'll come out that hole right there into this can and flow out into here, so that we don't have a big puddle of junk in here clogging up any of the ways or causing a problem or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and get that set up now. So the plug is out, all wiped off. And what I did is I took some of my painter's tape and tried to tape off my threads. The attempt at that is because in the past I found it can literally take me an hour of razor blades and awls trying to carefully pick at the threads and remove the excess, tank sealer that sits down in there as it drains. So I think I got this pretty good. In the end, we'll find out if it did any good or not. But if I can save myself some work in the end, it's totally worth taping off those threads. All right, let's get this draining. Real fancy, right? Got the can that we're draining into there. Got the old tank sealer can there holding it up. It wanted to tip forward a little bit. So yeah, you find something that's just tall enough to prop everything square. A tripod is the most stable thing in the universe. So here we got the side cutters, a can, and this this gas tank is going to be real solid. I'm going to let it drain for about 5 minutes and then set it back up and on its bottom and go back at some of these spots where I had to put in a patch fiber tape and paint over top of them to give a nice exterior coat in any of the places where there were pinholes bigger than a pin. Well, I had good intentions by, trying to tape off this thread, but that tank sealer, it just gets into everything. So don't bother taping those off. What you really need to do is dump it, drain it, and then get in here with a rag and wipe it all right away while it's still wet so that these threads aren't all gummed up. I mean, I might even go back in there another time with a little wire brush or something to clean them up really good. Now I'm moving on to putting the tank sealer on these outer surfaces in places like this and this. Grabbed a brush here that I don't really care about. It is not going to come back from this. This tank sealer is really thick and goopy, and it's not really worth washing it out of a brush. So I'm going to go at that, put a nice coat on top of each of these bigger holes and seal those up now. Well, I started applying my tank sealer with this little brush, and I went at, there's a little patch there, and there's a little patch there. And then I realized this whole bottom of this tank needs some love. So I went and got a 1-inch brush and applied it to the whole bottom of this thing. So now I have tank sealer on the inside and the outside. In the instructions, it does say that if you need to, apply it on the outside as well. So it's not like I'm breaking the rules or anything here. I'm just really making sure that the bottom of this tank doesn't have any pinholes that pop through. It's been sitting here for a while curing. It actually gets hard pretty fast. So I'm going to flip it over now and do some touch up on the top side. At some point, you got to put it down and walk away. This was one of the fiber patches I put in. That was another one of the fiber patches I put in. The problem is I read the instructions on this tank sealer, and they said that if you feel like you have problems on the outside of your tank, go ahead and coat it in those areas. Well, when I started doing patchwork, I thought it kind of looked a little dumb. So I took that brush and I just kept going and going and going. And, well, let's just say we got ourselves a tank that is completely covered in tank sealer in the inside and on the outside. So I'm going to call it right here. This looks pretty good. I'm going to let it cure for, it says up to 4 days. But I'm pretty happy with how this looks. Thanks for watching as I worked on this. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoy my channel, check out other videos I've made and give me a comment, give me a follow, share it with a friend, whatever you want. But thanks for watching. Fix It for Josh's sake.